Sox in the basement.
For a moment there, I thought the White Sox were going to go out and sign another Japanese star, and we were going to start a trend, my friend. I'm on the phone with my dad, and I'm looking at social media, and I'm seeing reports that the White Sox now are looking at that pitcher that ends up with the Astros, and he's 27 years old, and as James Fox of Future Sox called him, the best talent out there that didn't have a draft pick assigned to him or tied to him because of all the rules out there for free agency and qualifying offers. And I'm like, what is happening here? There's some big names going after him, and now here come the White Sox. Now, in the end, it's a seat at the table. They don't make the deal. The Astros get him. But I will tell you this. It's a seat at the table and because people were finally watching the White Sox. I think nobody paid attention to the first signing because nobody even considered they would be out there trying to do it. I think they got discovered this time around because they were a viable possibility to go after another free agent in the Japanese market, and that's why they end up getting discovered. Or they were used to try to get the price up so he could sign with somebody else. But, I'm not mad at the White Sox for not coming through on it. I'm a little disappointed in Jerry Reinsdorf. If he spent like a real owner, then maybe you get the guy, but you'd have a lot more players on this team, and you would be operating differently than you are. But it was exciting, and I think it shows that the Sox are not done. They are not done in any way. It's going to be an interesting offseason still in January, February, into March.
It's a mixed bag with Amai too, because I saw some stuff out there that suggested that his comps are guys like Sean Manaea, who are middle of the road starters, not stars, not front end of the rotation guys. And his contract with the Astros, he can opt out after the 2026 season. So it's not like they even signed him for more than a year. He's going to go to Houston and try and prove it that he is worth the big, long, Scott Boras-esque contract. And so if the White Sox wanted to have done that, I'm sure they probably could have. But I think they also, when you factor in, you've got Shane Smith, Davis Martin, and Anthony Kay already set up like that. If you consider Kay and Amai to be two guys who are going to come over from a foreign league and have to prove that they belong in the majors and that their numbers match up, then you've got a bit of a logjam there because you still have some other pitchers that you want to try and see what they can do in that fourth and fifth starter spot. But I just like the fact, I'm like you, I like the fact that there's even conversation around the White Sox that they are putting forth offers, especially for some of these guys that are, not getting big, long looks the way that some of the past Japanese stars have had, where the White Sox are a good team to slide in there and just say, look, we can pretty much guarantee you a spot, right? It's kind of what we talked about. When they get Murakami, he's got a lot to prove still to be that he's a major league player. And what better way to do it than to come to a team where there's no question that he's going to be given a chance to play every single day. The competition's not as great.
I think the thing that it made me feel was that the White Sox are signing another starter. That you don't go after this guy and then just stand pat for the next couple of months. So when you look at the rotation, this rotation's not complete yet. I think they intend to bring in at least one more legit starting pitcher. I think they looked at this guy as a legit starting pitcher. I don't think they stand pat here. I think that Anthony Kay is definitely making this team. I think when I look on Fangraphs roster resource, they're a little out of town stupid by saying that Sean Newcomb's going to make the rotation. That's not happening. All right, he's a left-handed relief pitcher. But Shane Smith is going to be in this rotation. Davis Martin's going to be in this rotation. Anthony Kay, who they sign, is going to end up being in this rotation. Right now, you would say Sean Burke, Jonathan Cannon to start the year, and you've got some young guys that are expected to make it here that you're hoping will push to get here, including a few that may end up being high-end starters long-term on this team. But I think there's really only going to be one spot for Jonathan Cannon and Sean Burke to fight for in spring training. And I love that. Because if they go out and sign another pitcher, they go out and sign another arm that is a legit starter, and it doesn't need to be a top of the rotation guy, and I don't think that they're ever going to do that. I think their intention is that number one and number two spot in their rotation, heck, maybe even the number 3, is coming from their organization or already there. That's how they see it. They're not going to pay the money for the guy that's going to start game 1 of a postseason or game 2 of a postseason. Not until Justin Ishbia gets there and if he changes the way things are run. So that's not how they're going to operate, because those require a lot of years and they require a lot of money. And that's something that the owner doesn't give out. Again, $17 million a year. This is the most this team has ever handed out to a single player. And when you look at the most that every team in Major League Baseball has handed out yearly, that is the lowest amount given out yearly as their number 1 signing, as their most expensive player they've spent money on in Major League Baseball. And I'm not expecting this team with Jerry Reinsdorf at the helm to make the jump to spend the money that they need to bring in a big ace. I don't care if they're competing. I remember when the money was going to be spent. It wasn't.
Well, it was, but it was spent poorly.
It was also not spent. I'm sorry. When they said the money was going to be spent, I believed that all those years of the rebuild when you were poor and you didn't spend anything, that money that you weren't spending was getting put into some sort of reserve so you could go out and really spend. But you didn't spend at that level when the money would be spent. And you didn't spend it properly. And you short-armed a little bit. You had alligator arms when it came time to pay for Manny Machado. And you ignored Bryce Harper, who wanted to come here, it sounds like, in interviews that have happened since then. So, no, in my mind, that was a lie. It wasn't, money was spent, but the money was not spent. Not the way it was promised.
Yeah. Not the money.
No,
you're right.
Money.
They're never going to spend the money.
The money wasn't spent.
Jerry did that. He figures he did that already when he needed to. And what I'm referring to is Carlton Fisk and Albert Bell.
Well, thank God we have that to hang our hat on. It was only 30 years ago or more. Thanks so much for that one. Look, here's the thing. The point I want to get to, I don't want to turn this into a Jerry Reinsdorf bash show. You could do that every episode and have plenty of material with this guy.
I mean, new year, new us. We're not going to bash Jerry all the time.
Just some of the time, okay? There'll be times
not so new
where
us.
I can bash him, okay? But
we're basically the same two guys.
But here's the thing. They're going to spend their money on that consistent pitcher that eats innings right now, or somebody they think has upside. And I can't imagine there was only one name on that list in the Japanese market. I think that they have other pitchers that they're going to go get. They're just like every other team working their way down the list. And I think what you're going to see is at least one more starter sign that would make sense based upon things that we heard from Scott Merkin and that we heard from James Fox and that I've read from those that are in the know and those that are talking about the team and what they may be angling for. Heck, it makes sense listening to Chris Getz's comments at the GM meetings and at the winter meetings. They're going to add another starter. It's going to be Shane Smith, Davis Martin, Anthony Kay, and that starter. And then there's going to be one spot available for competition between Sean Burke and Jonathan Cannon. Unless you want to throw Anthony Kay in there as well. Maybe he's one of those guys who's like, well, let's see what he can be. But if he shows up in spring and he's terrible, he loses the job as well. They didn't give him a ton of money. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. But that excites me as a fan because you need more than 5 starters on a team, first of all. And you need to have competition in this rotation. And if you walked in basically telling Burke and Cannon they had a job until one of these other guys came up from the minors, I think you do your entire team a disservice. Competition is a good thing. The idea that somebody's blocked is a ridiculous notion. The best player plays, and the guy who can't keep up gets left by the wayside. You don't have contracts on this team that prohibit you from moving on from a guy if he's not good enough. So I think that that's the right way to do it. That's what excited me the most. Look, I was on the phone with Dad, and I told him, oh, it looks like you're going after this guy. And I'm looking him up, and we're talking about it. And he's like, well, I don't know. What happened? Did Jerry find out he's dying? Why is he all of a sudden spending money? And then we both had a really good laugh about the idea that Jerry Reinsdorf could die. And then we both said the same thing, basically, in conversation. At least they're still doing stuff. There seems to be more of a plan this offseason. It excites me they're adding another pitcher, even if they don't get this guy, because I think we both felt when we got out the phone call, it was still far-fetched. With that many teams in there, knowing the money restrictions that are on the front office, they really can't compete with all of those teams. If you have several big market teams that will spend money, focus on a player they want, you're going to have a hard time getting that player. But I do like the idea they're looking for another pitcher.
Yeah, and I do wonder with Kona Takahashi's window closing, he's another pitcher from Japan who good stats, a little bit more established than am I, a little bit older too. He's going to turn 29 this year. I do wonder if he, because he's wanted to get into the majors, I wonder if Chris gets made a similar offer to whatever he made Amai, if Takahashi takes it, especially if he can prove himself on a 1 or 2 year deal and then still get the big major league deal that he's wanted for a couple of years. But there also comes the posting fees with these. So I don't know how much that factors into the decisions either.
For exterior windows, doors, patio doors, and storm doors, look no further than Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. No high-pressure sales. They are not walking into your place saying, look, here's the deal. And if you don't take the deal right now, I'm walking out that door with this dingy little half-broken window thingy that kind of looks like a window but really isn't and folds up like a suitcase in the back of my car. But if you don't give me the money right now and sign it on the dotted line to buy all new windows in your house, then this deal is no longer going to be there. They don't play those games. A lot of window places do play those games. Trust me, I actually sold windows for a little while, Ed. For about like 6 months when I was younger.
I could see you doing that.
And I was told to do that. You walk in, you show them the little example thing. You try to upgrade them. You give them a price, and then you tell them, if I walk out the door, the price is gone. Price is not gone.
Yeah.
That's all bull. That's why I hated it. I always hated being a salesperson because I felt the entire time I was just lying to people, and I hate to lie to people. So they don't lie to you at Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. They're very honest. The owners in the showroom, there's one on site. They use all their own installers. You don't get somebody who shows up there and they're like a day worker that isn't going to do a quality job. They've got trained professionals put it in there. They've been doing it that way for 40 years in Oak Forest since 1985 with all major brands custom made and no stock items for a perfect fit. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest is a half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. And so I am excited about the idea that we're looking at pitching and we're looking at additions and that there's competition. I mean, there's going to be so much competition in that bullpen and there's going to be competition for the rotation. And, we sit around and we talk about the idea of like, these are the names that are all competing for a rotation spot. But don't tell me that it isn't possible for Mike Vassell to get himself in the rotation. I feel like that if he goes out and he's great, you might see that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, don't tell me that there's a lot that could happen here. It's a very flexible. Like, you got guys that are going to be 3-inning relievers. You've got guys that are starters that can move into the bullpen. You've got guys that are bullpen that can move into the starting role. You have a lot of flexibility. The only thing I'm sure of is that Shane Smith and Davis Martin are pitching in the rotation. I wouldn't those are the only two that I would take my good hard-earned money and place on a counter and say, I guarantee they're in the rotation. Anthony Kane, maybe because you signed him.
Right.
Right? But I don't feel like it's a prohibitive deal. If he went out there and got shelled all spring training, I don't know if they start the season with him in there.
It's wide open, and they're kind of doing the same thing in the outfield. Jarred Kelenic comes here on a minor league deal. I mean, everybody makes the fact that he was the former number 4 prospect in all of baseball been a bit of a bust, but what are you doing with a signing like that? You're just creating competition. You're saying, look, I don't have a set outfield, so I'm going to see who wants it. And if this guy who desperately needs to revive what was once a promising career can show up and give me something and do what he's supposed to do, absolutely, he gets the job. If he doesn't, it's a minor league contract. I don't really care what happens to him. But they're not doing anything where it's like there's this fringe guy that is guaranteed a spot, right? And that's what I think is the difference between what's going on now and what we've seen in the past, where sometimes they have signed guys that you sat there and went, I don't know if this guy fits, but this is who they're relying on. So, go back to when the money was quote unquote spent, and everybody who wanted to look at Dallas Keuchel could sit there and look at it and go, what are we getting? This guy's been, he hasn't been the Cy Young winner. He hasn't been as good for the past couple of years, but here he is. He is guaranteed to be one of our top starters. And you got a problem with that. So I don't have a problem with the idea that they're going to sign another starter, but even that guy might be somebody that you sit there and look at and go, you know what? He's not guaranteed his spot. right? At this stage, competition is a good thing.
What do you think about this outfield situation, though? Because the Kelenic signing is just yet another guy that you could find something with. You've got a lot of guys that are ifs. Do you think they're going to roll the dice that they'll find one out of that group to start on opening day and be their guy? Or do you think they're still going to go out and add a legit outfielder that's got some power to them? Because let me tell you about Kelenic. That is Jarred Kelenic signing the non-roster, the NRI contract, the minor league contract with an invite to camp. So he'll be a non-roster invitee. That is so interesting to me because it makes sense for him. He knows there's a chance to make this team. And then it makes sense for the White Sox if they're looking at his 2023 season. And I remember that season because I am on my fantasy team. I had kept him forever. He was going to be such a big-time player. I had held on to him in the minor leagues for years. I did not want to give up on him. I was so frustrated. And right before I end up dropping this guy, he starts hitting. And he gets an OPS plus that year of 111. And there was a point where he was doing even better than that. And he slid off a little bit at the back end of the year. He was on fire. He had a 746 OPS hitting 253 with 11 home runs over only 105 games. And he goes to Atlanta. And now think about this. You leave a cavernous ballpark in Seattle. He goes to Atlanta and goes right back to sucking, just like he had before that season. So it's like he didn't really figure it out. And they give him a whole season. They give him 131 games to go out and hit 231 with an 87 OPS plus, a 697 or 679 OPS, and they move on from him. I wonder if the White Sox look at him and say, there's some things we'd like to see. What if we made some changes? We see something on the film. If we can get this guy in there and in spring training, he starts listening to us, we got a guy who's only going to be 26 years old this year. We got a guy all of a sudden that was a high-end prospect that just struggled. I mean, he came up at 21 years old and struggled. At 23 years old, he started to put it together, and then he ends up on Atlanta for his 24 and 25 season with a completely different organization and falls back off again. And they barely use him last year. He had a 2.1 B-WAR in 23. Like, are they looking at this like, if we could just get him to listen to us, we think we know the secret to him. He could be a big surprise. He could also be cut before the last day of spring training, right? But they seem to be doing a lot of this, like young guys on the cusp, have had a cup of coffee, or a guy like him where they're like, he's young enough that if we can fix him, whoo boy, what do we got?
Well, call it the Miguel Vargas syndrome, right? I mean, one of the things that we've talked about with Vargas, and not that he's become a world beater by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a massive difference between performing for the White Sox versus performing for a team that's supposedly contending. And keep in mind, the Braves, even though they sucked last year, went into the season with World Series aspirations, right? They are an NL East contender for the division every single year. Last year, they just happened to be really, really bad for a lot of reasons. So Kelenic is part of that disappointment. And as a guy who is trying to establish himself as a mainstay in this organization and a mainstay in a major league roster, put a lot of pressure on himself. So there is a possibility that, that they've looked at this and gone, we know how he gets to a 276 career batting average in the minors with an 835 OPS, where he's got a really, really solid low strikeout rate of about 22%, 23%, which isn't bad at all. And, it has a good on-base percentage of 350. The skills are clearly there. If he's in a situation, this team is just, they're playing with house money. If they win anything this year, if they reach 500, it's going to be a great result, right? So he's a guy that he can sit there and say, I'm not here to lead this team. I'm no longer the guy. I'm just a guy, right? I don't have to be better than Colson Montgomery because Colson Montgomery's here. I don't have to be better than Murakami because Murakami's here. I don't have to hit 40 home runs. If he hits 25 or 30 and gives them a solid season of 250 hitting, I mean, oh my gosh.
I think he's a 20 home run guy, I think, at best.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that he would get to 30, but
he hits 30 home runs. I'll walk down 35th Street outside of the ballpark naked. Okay? Write it down.
Okay.
Jarred Kelenic hits 30 home runs for the White Sox this year. I'll walk down the street naked. And that's bad for me, and it's bad for all of you that would watch it. Don't watch it.
It is. It is not a good.
Hide your eyes.
It's not going to be a good. Yes. Shield your eyes.
Let's get to the Sox nerd. it means the Sox nerd Dave Marin is on the line once again here on Sox in the Basement, giving you all the trivia and tidbits and nuggets that he puts up on the scoreboard at the rate. In fact, he gives you even more on Sox in the Basement because he's not doing it right now over at the rate. There's snow out there, and it's cold, and there's no baseball. But he'll be doing it again soon in a couple of months, and until then, you get him right here on this program brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore, see the Lamont Unlocked podcast as we travel all throughout Lamont and find out everything that goes on in that town, eat some great food, meet some amazing people, see it all, and learn what's going on in Lamont at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me?
Chris, how about some nuggets on recent Sox signee Sean Newcomb? The left-handed pitcher was signed on December 23rd, 2 days after the acquisition of Japanese slugger Munetaka Murakami, whom I featured in my last segment. Newcomb hails from Brockton, Massachusetts, the same town that gave us Steve Bye-Bye Balboni, Marvelous Marvin Hangler, and the Brockton blockbuster Rocky Marciano. Hopefully Nuke's left hook is as potent as Hagler's and Marciano's. The Sox are no stranger to Newcomb's native Massachusetts. Newcomb will most likely join fellow Bay Staters Sean Burke, Shane Smith, and Mike Vassell on the Sox pitching staff in 2026. The upcoming season could be just the second time in history the Sox have 4 Massachusetts natives on the roster. The first was 2025 with Burke, Smith, Vassell, and the departed Jared Schuster. The White Sox will be the well-traveled Newcomb's 7th organization. The 32-year-old has previously been with the Angels, Braves, Cubs, Giants, A's, and Red Sox before joining our Sox. The Angels made Newcomb the 15th overall pick of the 2014 draft. That was an interesting first round with Carlos Rodon going 3rd to the Sox, Kyle Schwarber going 4th to the Cubs, and Trey Turner going 13th to the Padres. Among those selected after Newcomb were Touki Toussaint at 16 to the Diamondbacks, Eric Fetty at 18 to the Nationals, current Sox outfielder Derek Hill 23rd to the Tigers, and Michael Kopech 33rd to the Red Sox. Newcomb has been involved in some interesting games in his career. On July 29, 2018 for the Braves, he was 1 strike away from no-hitting the Dodgers before Chris Taylor rolled a single to left on his 134th pitch of the game. With the A's on June 21, 2024, Newcomb became the 27th pitcher in history to earn a win without facing a batter. Facing the Twins in Oakland, Newcomb entered in the 8th with 2 on and 2 out with the A's down by a run. After throwing 2 pitches to Willie Castro, Newcomb ended the frame by essentially picking off Austin Martin. In the next half, Shea Langoliers' 2-run homer gave the A's the lead for good and handed Newcomb a batterless W. By the way, that has happened twice for the Sox. Once by Chris Volstad on June 3, 2018, and once by Hal McCain on July 25, 1929. Both were the results of caught stealings. And just last season, on April 11th, at the rate, Newcomb started and took the L in the White Sox 11-1 win over Boston. In that one, Newcomb walked Chase Meidroth in Meidroth's first career plate appearance and surrendered a single to Meidroth in his second plate appearance. Some observations: Newcomb has been both a starter and a reliever in his 9-year career. He has been much more effective as a reliever. He is 14-6 with a 3.84 ERA and a 1.35 WHIP, and an opponent's slash line of 232, 328, and 368 in relief. As a starter, Newcomb is 16-24 with a 4.41 ERA and a 1.5 WHIP, and a foe's slash line of 257, 350, and 400. Last year, the contrast was even more pronounced. Newcomb started 2025 as a member of the Red Sox starting rotation and went 0-3 with a 4.43 ERA, and all of his numbers, whip, opponent slash lines, etc., were gross. Newcomb hit his stride after being dealt to the A's, where he became full-time out of the pen. Over his final 36 outings, all in relief, Newcomb logged a 1.75 ERA with a 1.1 whip and 214 opponent's average, plus 28 of his 36 A's outings were scoreless. Newcomb has been really good in May and June, going 14-5 with a 2.98 ERA. In all other months, he is 16-25 with a 4.30 ERA. And get this, Newcomb has not allowed a grand slam as a big leaguer. Since making his big league debut in the middle of 2017, the only pitcher to face more batters with the bases loaded than Newcomb's 81 and not give up a granny is Tim Hill. Remember him? At 92. Before I get to my zinger, let me remind you, all my 2025 player reviews are finished, and I am posting birthday updates, a daily Sox list, and almanac items on Twitter on my WordPress blog, which you can link to at soxinthebasement.com. My zinger? Indiana certainly has made a name for itself in football lately. As for baseball, the greatest Hoosier ever is Schwarber, and IU products to play for the Sox include Barry Jones, Micah Johnson, Josh Fagley, and Ted Kluszewski. That's it, Chris. Probably more than you wanted to know about Nuke, the Bay State, and no batter wins.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.